Close your eyes and imagine a world tens of thousands of years ago, when small bands of humans moved quietly across wild landscapes, their lives fragile against the cold and the dark. One day, someone in their group no longer rose with the dawn, and for the first time, they did not simply leave the body behind. Instead, they dug into the earth, placed the figure gently within, sprinkled red ochre, laid tools, flowers, or bones beside them, and covered them with care. This was not survival. This was something deeper, the first mystery of human burial. In the vast silence of the prehistoric world, long before cities rose or words were written, there came a moment that marked a turning point in what it meant to be human. A moment when life and death were no longer separated by simple abandonment, but connected by memory, care, and mystery, and it began with the first human burial. Imagine a small band of people moving through an ancient landscape, the air crisp with the scent of pine, the earth cold beneath their feet, the stars shining more brightly than we will ever know them now. Among them, one of their own has fallen. A hunter, a mother, a child. It does not matter who, only that this person no longer breathes, no longer walks with the living. For countless generations before, death may have meant leaving the body where it fell, letting the earth or the animals take what remained, for survival gave little time for sentiment, but something had changed in the human heart. They did not walk away. Instead, they lingered. With quiet hands, they gathered stones, they scraped at the ground, they shaped a hollow in the earth, and into this hollow they placed the one they had lost. Perhaps they laid them upon a bed of leaves, perhaps they painted the body with red. Ochre, the color of life and blood, a symbol of rebirth or protection. Around the body, they placed small things, a tool, a piece of food, an ornament of bone or shell, not for the dead to use, but for reasons deeper, reasons that spoke, of love, of memory, of belief that death was not an end, but a doorway. When the earth was pulled gently over the still form, when stones were placed to mark the place, something in humanity shifted forever. It was no longer just life and death. It was life, death, and meaning. Archaeologists have found traces of these first burials in caves in Europe, in ancient sites in the Middle East, graves that date back tens of thousands of years, where skeletons lie curled as if in sleep, painted with ochre, surrounded by offerings, their resting places deliberate, intentional, sacred. One of the most famous burials is that of a young child at Kafsa Cave in Israel, laid to rest with deer antlers near its head, as if the tribe believed the spirit of the animal would protect or guide the child into another world, another lies. In Shanagar Cave in Iraq, where Neanderthals buried their dead with flowers, pollen grains still detectable after tens of thousands of years, suggesting not only care, but ritual, beauty, tenderness. These were not acts of necessity, they were acts of meaning, the first signs that humans looked at death not only with fear, but with imagination. And in this imagination, the first questions were born: where do we go when the body lies still? Does something remain unseen beyond breath and blood? The first burial was not simply about the dead, it was about the living, about how those left behind made sense of loss, about how they held on to connection, even when eyes closed forever. The act of burial transformed the tribe itself, for it gave them a way to gather, to mourn, to share memory, and to bind themselves together in something greater than survival. Around the grave, they might have sung, they might have wept, they might have told stories of the one who was gone. And in those moments, they were no longer just individuals bound by hunger and fear, but a community bound by memory and meaning. The burial site became a sacred place, a place they might return to, a place that told them who they were and where they came from. And so, in these earliest graves, we glimpse the beginning of culture, of religion, of humanity's endless quest to make sense of the unknown. For in that soft earth lay not only bones, but the seeds of myth, the first whispers of belief in spirits, ancestors, afterlives. Each burial was a bridge, connecting the living to the dead, the present to the eternal, the seen to the unseen. And it was done not with grandeur, not with monuments, but with tenderness, with stones and soil, with offerings and ochre, with hands that trembled but did not abandon. These first burials remind us that even in the harshest ages, in a world where every day was a battle for food and shelter, humans found time to love, to remember, to hope, to dream. They remind us that the essence of humanity is not only in our strength to endure, but in our capacity to honor, to imagine, to care. And as we lie in our own beds tonight, eyes closing with the weight of sleep, we carry within us the echo of those first mourners, who knelt by the side of their dead and chose, for the first time, to give them to the earth with meaning. In that act was the beginning of history's most enduring mystery, the mystery of the first human burial. As time moved forward and the winds of the Ice Age swept across valleys and mountains, the practice of burial slowly spread, carrying with it the gentle weight of meaning, until it became not just an act, but a ritual, a thread woven into the fabric of human existence. And with each new grave dug into the earth, the mystery deepened. Burial was no longer only about placing the body in the ground. It became a ceremony, a passage marked with gestures, songs, and symbols that reached toward something unseen. Some tribes gathered flowers and scattered them over the still body, a silent promise of beauty even in death. Others placed tools or weapons by the side of the departed, as if arming them for a journey beyond life. In many sites, archaeologists find beads, pendants, and ornaments, the simplest adornments of bone, ivory, or shell laid carefully with the dead, proof that humans gave more than function, they gave meaning, they gave honor. Slowly, burials became sacred, not only for the dead, but for the living. For the act of returning a loved one to the earth bound the community together, gave them shared rituals, gave them a way to carry grief as something not destructive but transformative. The grave became a place of gathering, a site where people could return, where memory lived in the earth, where stories could be told to children about those who had come before. And so burials became the first markers of ancestry, the first roots of heritage, reminding each tribe that they were not only beings of the present, but part of a chain stretching back into time. In these rituals, humanity began to form its earliest spirituality. They looked at the grave and asked, if we bury with care, if we give offerings, if we speak to the one who has gone, will something of them remain? Will they hear? Will they watch? Thus, the idea of spirits and afterlives was born not from abstract thought, but from the act of kneeling by the earth, laying a body down with tenderness, and whispering a final farewell. The sacredness of burial also shaped how people saw the land around them, for certain caves became holy, certain groves became resting places, and sacred landscapes were formed where tribes felt the presence of ancestors. A cave was no longer just a shelter. It was a temple, because within its shadows lay those who had gone before. A meadow was no longer just hunting ground. It was a graveyard, a place of silence, where voices of the dead might linger in the rustle of grass. With these places came reverence, a sense that some parts of the earth were not to be disturbed, that they were touched by mystery. Slowly, this reverence began to shape the rhythms of life. For a tribe that buried its dead together was a tribe that remembered together, that carried not only bodies, but also traditions and values across generations. In this way, burial became a kind of inheritance, each generation adding another grave to the earth, another layer of memory, another stone to the circle of meaning. The first human burial had begun as an act of care, but as it spread it became a map of belief, a sign that humans were searching for something larger, something enduring. And as we look back now, thousands of years later, standing before these ancient graves, we realize that they are not simply pits in the ground. They are the first temples, the first sacred places, built not of stone or wood, but of memory, love, and the mystery of life and death. With each passing generation, the simple act of burial began to evolve into something far greater, shaping the very foundations of human imagination. For once the dead were honored with care, it was only natural that their memory began to live on in stories, in symbols, and in art. Around ancient hearths, elders told tales of those who had been laid to rest, of hunters who still guided the living through dreams, of mothers who watched over their children from beyond the veil of night. And so myth was born, rising gently from the soil of burial grounds. The offerings placed beside the dead, beads, shells, ochre, were no longer mere tokens of farewell. They became symbols, reminders that the invisible could be touched, that the unseen could be honored. Soon, humans painted images of spirits and animals on cave walls, images that may have been connected to these same rituals, their flickering light casting shadows that danced like the souls of the departed. The burial site itself became sacred ground, a place where ritual dances were performed, where chants echoed against stone, where the tribe gathered not just to grieve, but to feel closer to the mystery that lay beneath the earth. And in these moments, the first threads of religion began to weave themselves through human life, not as doctrine or temple, but as feeling, as reverence, as awe. Burial connected humans to something larger than survival, for it forced them to ask questions. With no easy answers, what happens when breath stops? Where does the spark of life go? Is there a world beyond this one? These questions gave birth to ritual, to prayer, to offerings, to the earliest glimpses of worship. The dead became ancestors, guardians, spirits whose presence lingered in caves, in forests, in the wind itself, and belief in their watchful power shaped how tribes lived and moved. They hunted with rituals to honor the dead hunters before them. They danced before journeys to ask protection from spirits. They whispered prayers before burials to guide the departed safely. And as these beliefs grew, art became their companion, carrying symbols of life, death, and rebirth across stone walls and carved bones. The spirals, the animals, the painted figures with outstretched arms, all may have carried echoes of burial. Rituals, an attempt to give shape to what could not be seen. Thus, burials did more than honor the dead. They seeded the very roots of religion, the idea that there was more to existence than the body, that there was a hidden world filled with mystery and spirit. These graves, quiet and humble, became the first scriptures written not in words but in ochre, in bone, in ritual movement, teaching the living how to make sense of loss and how to live with hope. And in their stillness, they gave birth to culture itself, for art, myth, and religion all blossomed from the soil of the grave, growing outward to touch every part of human life, reminding us even now that our deepest stories began with the simple, mysterious act of laying our dead to rest. As the ages passed and the first burials multiplied across valleys, caves, and plains, they began to shape not only belief but identity itself, for to bury one's dead was to root memory into the earth, to tie a community to a place, and to weave ancestry into the story of survival. Graves became markers that whispered, "We were here. We lived, we loved, we remembered," and in their silence they bound generations together. A child growing up beside the resting places of elders learned that life was part of a chain, that their own existence was linked to those who came before and those who would come after, and this sense of lineage gave tribes a deeper strength, a reason to endure storms, hunger, and struggle. Burials turned landscapes into sacred maps. A cave where bones were laid became more than shelter, it became holy ground. A meadow dotted with stone cairns became more than hunting land. It became a memory field where spirits lingered, and the people who carried these places within them began to see themselves as more than wanderers. They became the children of the ancestors, the keepers of sacred places, the guardians of meaning. With each burial, identity deepened and community grew tighter for the act of gathering around. The dead was not only about grief, it was about unity, about reminding each other that they were one people bound by shared loss and shared hope. Even migrations were shaped by these ties, as tribes returned to ancient graves, carrying rituals with them into new lands. And wherever they traveled, they created new sacred spaces, planting memory into soil that would one day belong to their descendants. Over time, these burials became the quiet foundations of culture, for in honoring the dead, humans discovered heritage, and in heritage they discovered belonging. What began as a gentle gesture, covering a body with soil, sprinkling ochre, placing a tool, became the root of our sense of self, the invisible thread that links us across thousands of years. And so, when we stand today before the ancient graves at Kafsa, Shanidar, or Sanjir, we are not only looking at bones in the earth. We are looking into mirrors of ourselves, echoes of the first people who wondered about life, death, and the beyond, who whispered love into the silence of loss, and who gave us the mystery that still lingers in every cemetery, in every ritual of farewell, in every quiet moment when we think of those who have gone. The first human burial was more than an act of care. It was the birth of identity, of ancestry, of meaning itself, and in that moment, humanity stepped out of survival and into history, carrying with it a mystery that will never fade, the mystery of what lies beyond the grave.